I'm an iPhone guy and I have been for many, many years. So why is my phone of the year this year not an iPhone? I'm lucky enough to get sent quite a few iPhones as part of this job. I've got loads in this drawer, actually. So, for instance, I've got the S22 Ultra. I bought that, actually, and yeah. Oh, we've got the Google Pixel 4a. That was my first ever Pixel phone, and I absolutely love it. We've also got the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 4. We do say Z in this country, sorry. Love it, brilliant. Then we've got the Nothing Phone 1 with its silly, pointless lights, which is actually a brilliant budget phone. More recently, I've been sent the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV. Come on, Sony, these names. And this is also very interesting. It's really long, it's got lots of pro camera features, but I don't think you want me to review this. I've asked the question and it wasn't particularly unanimous in terms of you wanting me to cover this. Plus, I don't really know how to review it, to be completely honest with you. And more importantly, today, I just want to take the SIM card out of this and put it back into this. And that's because I really, really love the Google Pixel 7 Pro. It's already my phone of the year. I don't care that it's only October. And in this video, I'm going to explain why. Right, cards on the table. There are more smartphones out there than I have the time, the inclination, or the budget to cover. I can't get my hands on all of them, it's impossible, but I do love the fact that there is this abundance of competition that really keeps the likes of Samsung and Google and also Apple on their toes. And you do get regional favourites, obviously. The likes of Xiaomi, for example, you're not going to find that much of in the UK, but they're everywhere in countries like India. And then you've got the crazy niche stuff like the ROG, whatever they're called phones, which have got fans built into them and crazy RGB lights and stuff. But those middle of the pack phones play such an important role against the established iPhones, Galaxies and the Pixels of the world. The only problem is that they don't really excite me personally. What has excited me this year is a phone which is doing its level best. It's really, really trying very hard to pull me away from Tim Cook's walled garden. Damn you, Google. I really believe that simplicity wins the day when it comes to smartphones. And that's because I think we've reached a point where smartphones have peaked in terms of their current innovation. The technology that's available and that is consumer ready, that's the important thing, has kind of plateaued really. We've got amazing cameras, amazing build quality, waterproofing, dustproofing, brilliant operating systems, augmented reality, machine learning. There's just so much going on inside these phones. Where do you go from here now? And more importantly, what I see in the comments threads of these videos is that very few people have the time or the inclination to wade through all of these spec deep dives and compare features between phones. For instance, how many times over the last few months have you seen someone tweet 2 different photos from 2 different phones of the same subject and ask you to pick your favourite? And how many times have you looked at those 2 photos and thought they look the same? I think if you spend over 300, 350 maybe on a smartphone these days, you're just going to love whatever you end up with. Google understands this. It's why their A series of phones are so well pitched. For me, the 4A completely rewrote the script when it came to budget phones, and the 6A just turned that up a notch even further. But they have gone far beyond this, and before the A series phones, I had never touched a regular Pixel phone. That all changed when they sent me the Pixel 7 Pro and the regular Pixel 7 to review, and immediately I fell in love with both of them, particularly the 7 Pro. And this is my smartphone of the year for 2 reasons: price and camera performance. And the latter kind of arrives without much of a fanfare. Google very rarely talks about the camera hardware in these phones, and that's mainly because it doesn't change that often. What does change is all the clever software stuff that goes on behind the scenes. They are masters at this, and don't get me wrong, the iPhone does just as good a job in terms of taking photos and making sure that when you press that button, you get a usable shot. But it's a matter of taste, and for my taste, the Pixel series phones have always produced more pleasing images. And as for price, this is an area where the iPhone cannot compete. This phone starts at £849 in the UK for the 128GB version. It has some very tempting trade-in options as well, and I think potentially, don't quote me on this, but they have been offering free Pixel Buds Pro or even a free Pixel Watch with the purchase. Apart from the trade-in, which is never that good with Apple, you certainly don't get a free Apple Watch. But the fact this has a great design, iPhone-like build quality, and the purest version of Android you'll ever find end is just icing on the cake. And the iPhone 14 Pro Max is the closest competitor to the Pixel 7 Pro because of the screen size. However, whereas this starts at £849, this starts, let me get this right, at £1,199 for the 128GB version. That's 350 quid more expensive than this, and ironically, a pricing difference that's about 49 quid shy of the starting price of the Pixel 6a. What do you get for that 350 quid extra? Well, you get an iPhone that is at the pinnacle of its design, the top of the game in terms of the place it has within the Apple ecosystem. It's a joy to use, it's built like a tank, but that's about it. The problem is that it is still 350 quid more than that Pixel 7 Pro. And at the minute, we're facing rising costs, economic turmoil, and if you live in the UK, no idea about what's going to happen next. And Apple has, quite rightly, been panned recently for raising the prices of its iPhones, its iPads, and more recently, its services. And I think what has always been a very expensive brand in Apple is getting largely unattainable for a lot of people. For that reason alone, I cannot make the iPhone my phone of the year in 2022. Don't get me wrong, Apple isn't doomed. They've got more money in the bank than most companies and, let's be honest, countries would know what to do with. But I really do think that the Pixel 7 Pro is a huge sledgehammer blow to the iPhone Pro lineup. As hinted earlier, there were some interesting runners-up for my completely made-up Phone of the Year award. I love the Z Flip 4, mainly because it does that, because that's interesting, but also because it's quite a nice size in comparison to the iPhone 14 Pro Max. The Nothing Phone 1 I do miss big time. I used it for 2 or 3 weeks before having to swap to something else. That is the downside of running this business where you have to keep trying different Android phones. Occasionally one comes along that you absolutely adore, but you can't use it for that long because you have to try something else. Basically, if you're not bothered about the Pixel 6a, this is the next best option when it comes to a budget smartphone. And yes, this Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV does some really interesting things with smartphone photography. And the thing is, Apple will never make, for example, a phone with flashing lights on the back of it. I bet they haven't even bothered trying this in their labs. And we won't see a folding or flipping iPhone for many, many years, if ever. That isn't going to consign Apple to the history books. They are not doomed. I cannot overemphasize that enough, but it does make them less interesting. But the bigger problem for Apple is the fact that their devices are getting more and more expensive. And the reason this phone is so interesting isn't because it folds or has lights on the back of it. It's because it focuses resolutely on the two things that consumers care about. We want great value for money, and we want the ability to capture life's moments beautifully. It's really simple stuff. We're not asking for the world here, and Google's efforts in both of those areas will really take some beating. If you want to see my original full review of this phone and also the regular Pixel 7, where I took them both to London for the day, keep watching for a link.